It's just that as far as international nuclear law concerned, it's a very settled principle, very settled principle. It's very much compliance based when you looked into the standards required by the international IAEA body, and also if you looked at all those provisions in the convention and treaties. But again, I think for a particular state member or a government to comply with those standards, there are of course other issues that they have to take into consideration. So I think that might lead to the disconnection, yeah, of that particular issue, the networking and interface. Because let's say, for instance, a particular provision in relation to public acceptance, yeah, or requirement as regards to public acceptance. But at the same time, I think maybe for some state members felt that having consultation from the relevant stakeholder can be a little bit sensitive over time. And in fact, now after post-Fukushima, it's become a major component at that particular moment. So I have to say, if you, as far as what you mentioned, whether the issue is whether there is a disconnect between international nuclear law and the political will, I think in some senses there are issues of concern, yes, because the particular government would not be able to immediately accede to such requirement, because there are national interests to be considered of. There are, of course, political issues and economic consideration that they have to comply. So, and in some situation, they can be in conflict at the same time. But as far as maybe to ensure that the best practice is being complied with, you must have certain standards. That's where I think the main function of the principles imposed by the international governing body is there. Right? But it is not necessarily automatically be suitable for every government. As it is, I think the principle of respect is always being part of our acceptance based on the Asian Charter, and we have abided to it for so long. But when it comes to nuclear security, it's something else. This is something I have to believe that I think as far as nuclear security and nuclear culture is concerned, it is very important that we have to perceive foreign policy in a different dimension, you know, in order for it to work. Yeah? But of course there can be regional cooperation as well. We have cooperated in other matters before, it is very successful, but again, as I said, nuclear security is of a different nature. Yeah, it is very sensitive. So in that sense, I have to say that in order to ensure that ASEAN member states abide by the same principle, I think there must be a lot of give and take, consideration, and of course the extent in which we wanted to bend the rules, because I think the Asian Charter clearly states that we have to respect. So I would hope that in future, perhaps in this particular situation, that more parties, I think, should be willing to perhaps compromise on some matter. I think compromising is a situation in which you still maintain that respect in all situations. Yeah. Of course, when you talk about accountability and transparency, you talk about access to information, access to information, dissemination of information. That is one, I think, in terms of exchange, of sharing of information, and even disclosure is very important. Now, of course, there is the Convention on the Notification of Nuclear Incident, in which I think most of the countries in ASEAN country has actually signed and ratified. So in such event, I think such country has a duty to disclose or inform the other member state in such situation. So I have to say that members should have that obligation to a certain extent, disclose The principle of disclosure is a key element in order to ensure that there's transparency and accountability. And of course, there must be a deep trust among the ASEAN countries, which has already been there. But again, I think because issue of nuclear security has always entailed other repercussions as well. So we do need to actually try to work out what's the best way for the solution. That's a tough one. well, actually, I don't know for sure. Again, I think that's still a deep secret. Actually, I think I know for the fact that there are selected what you call a venue point, and they are shortlisted. But we can never know actually what would be the final decision, if there is a final decision, because as I mentioned earlier, we are still in a phase of preparation. Between 2011 to 2021. So until that happens, we have not actually reached into the decision stage. If that happened, I think there's a lot of due consideration that has to be taken into account by the government. If not for Singapore, even for Malaysia as well, because we are, we have 11 states in Peninsula, 2 states, and of course this is a very sensitive issue. I do hope it would not come to a situation where it will actually affect the relationship. Of course, the 2 countries has a very long historical relationship. And in such event, I think what is best is to perhaps to discuss and talk over it. But again, I have to say that this is still a very highly, confidential thing. I'm not too sure the relevant, what you call the strategic resources for that. But I suppose as neighboring countries, whatever happens, I think we still need each other. And we still need to talk it out, what would be the best situation for all of us in the region. Thank you.